Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to show you how to set up a Amazon OpenSearch aka ElasticSearch cluster, and then I'm going to show you how to load it with some sample data and then visualize some of that sample data in the dashboard for OpenSearch. And one thing to keep in mind is that everything that I'm going to show you here is part of the AWS Free Tier, so if you have an account that is less than 12 months old, you're not going to be charged anything for using this setup or following this guide, so just keep that in mind. And if you have an account that is older than 12 months, this may cost you a couple dollars, but you can always just create a brand new one to avoid these charges. Okay, so in order to get started, you're going to go to the Amazon OpenSearch service if it's under your recently visited, or you can just type in OpenSearch up here. It's just going to bring us to the home page. So we're going to go ahead and click on OpenSearch. And so this brings us to the OpenSearch dashboard. So in order to get started, we have three different options here. We have the managed cluster, we have serverless, and we have ingestion. And so managed cluster is what we're going to use because it allows us to control the infrastructure and the number of nodes. And this will enable us to make sure that we stay within the free tier. Serverless is if you don't want to worry about the infrastructure itself and just want it to auto scale. Keep in mind that there is infrastructure working behind the scenes and you just don't really have visibility into it and it automatically scales for you. And then there's this new feature called the ingestion feature, which is more for just setting up a pipeline to ingest large volumes of data, say from like CloudTrail or S3 or things like that. But we're not going to be using either of these two. We're going to be going with managed clusters here. So make sure you have this selected and go ahead and click on create domain here. And so for domain name, you're going to set this to whatever you really want. So let's just call this my domain is fine. And make sure that you follow these instructions carefully, or else if you don't, you may end up accidentally ticking a box that can kind of cause you to be charged some money. So make sure you follow this closely. So the first thing that we want to do is change the domain creation method from easy create to standard create. This is going to allow us to override some of the defaults and make sure that we stay within the free tier. So standard create is what we want. We're also going to change the production mode or the template mode from production to dev test. And this is going to kind of strip out some of those added features like multi-AZ availability and all that kind of stuff. But we can override some of these in a couple moments as well. So we're going to click on dev test here. And then this next option is for deployment options. So if you want to deploy your domain or your cluster with a standby such that if your cluster fails or the hardware that is hosting your cluster fails, there will be a node that's in a separate availability zone that it'll fail over to. This is how you would use it. You'd select domain with standby. But for us, since this is just a testing purpose, we're going to go ahead and click on domain without standby and just select one availability zone here. Make sure you select one availability zone here because if you select 2 or 3, you're going to set up additional nodes. Basically, it's however many nodes that you want to set up multiplied by however many availability zones you select here. So make sure you do select this to be 1. Okay, and let's go down now. We're going to talk about engine options. We're going to keep this as 2.7. You can also select from 1.3, which was one of the earlier ones. And then if you want to use just the normal Elasticsearch engine, you can use either version 7.10 or 6.8. I think this is around where they forked from Elasticsearch into OpenSearch, so it's probably like something after 7.10. But for us, we want to go with the newest version of OpenSearch here, so it's 2.7. No compatibility mode, that's fine. Let's go to data nodes now. Okay, for this, make sure you follow along closely as well. So for instance type, we want to change it from R6G large search, and we want to go all the way to the bottom here to T3 small search. This qualifies for the free tier. You get to use it for 30 days, provided your account is 12 months old or less. So that's what we're going to select. And like it kind of says here, it's suitable only for testing and development. For production, we recommend latest generation instance types, yada, yada, yada. But we're just testing around here. We're playing with this. It doesn't really matter if it's not performing. It's just for us to get a general feel of how this service works. So we're going to go to number of nodes. Make sure you change this from 3 being the default to 1 so that you don't get charged anything. For storage type, leave it as EBS. For EBS volume type, general purpose GB3 is fine, and you want to make sure you change the storage size per node from 100, which is the default, down to 10 because that's what qualifies for the free tier as well. And so you're pretty much good to go here. Advanced volume types, you shouldn't really care about this if this just is for testing. This is kind of the read IOPS and the throughput for your EBS, but you don't need to touch this. If you change these numbers, like go like this, like you can see it's, well, I can't highlight here. Additional additional 1774 IOPS to incur fees. Make sure that you leave this as the lowest so that you don't incur any additional charges. So let's just minimize that. Warm and cold storage data, we're not going to use this. We're not going to use dedicated master nodes as well. In a production use case, you may want to use this. And this just effectively makes it so that you set up additional nodes that exist in your cluster. And these master nodes are responsible for things like traffic routing, for things like replication and maintenance tasks. This offloads some of the responsibility from the data nodes, which actually host your data and are serving real traffic, to your master nodes so they can perform all these administrative tasks. So for us, we don't need to do this, but if you did want to do this in production, you can tick this and you select the instance type. There's a whole bunch. You can research which one is right for your use case and the number of nodes as well. There's between 3 and 5, but we're not going to do this. So just leave this box unticked. Okay, and then there's a snapshot configuration. You can't change anything here, so it's hourly snapshots, custom endpoints. So if you have a domain that you set up as part of AWS and you have a certificate, you can click on this. You can see your certificate. So this is my website. If I wanted to have like opensearch.beabetterdev.com as my hostname, I can do that, but we're not going to do that in this case. So this is going to mean that AWS automatically assigns just a random domain for us that we can tinker with, which is totally fine for our use case. Okay, going down to network now. So for this, how you should set this up in a production or even something where you care about security is have it as VPC access so recommended. And then you're going to want to select your normal VPC and then your subnet and then a security group. And this is going to allow you to keep your ElasticSearch, I shouldn't say ElasticSearch, your OpenSearch instance private and not exposed to the public internet. And this is going to allow you to control the access to your OpenSearch instance and just kind of set up who has access and who doesn't. Ideally, you want to put this in a VPC and have it in a private subnet that does not have inbound internet access, and just have it get kind of access from something that's in a kind of public subnet. Maybe it's like an EC2 instance that's hosting traffic, and then that can communicate with your cluster. But for us, since this is just a demonstration, we're just going to enable public access here, which again, strongly suggest you don't do this in production. This is going to cause a whole bunch of problems, so don't do this. But for us, just experimenting right now, this is totally fine, since we're going to delete this thing after anyways. Okay, going down now and going to fine-grained access control. We don't want fine-grained access control. This allows you to set up features that allow you to kind of keep your data secure and it actually says here. So document level security, field level security, read-only users, OpenSearch dashboards, and Kibana tenants. There's a whole bunch of things that you can do. You can click on this hyperlink to bring you there as well. But I'm just going to create one master user that we can use to log in as when we get to our dashboard. Actually, we're going to leave this and then create a master user. So let's say just admin, and I'll give this whatever a password that I'll remember. Okay, scrolling down now, we don't want to enable SAML authentication. We don't want to enable Amazon Cognito authentication, but it is useful in certain use cases, like real life use cases, where you want maybe certain users to be logged in to Amazon Cognito and authenticated before they can log in to your OpenSearch dashboard. So not useful for us right now since we have this master user to work with, but for production use cases, definitely something to consider. And then scrolling down to access policy. And so you don't want to leave it as default here. Do not set domain level access policy because as you can see, all requests to the domain will be denied. So don't do this. You want to go to only use fine-grained access control, which is going to allow open access to the domain. So we are going to click on the first one here. Encryption, we don't care about this. We're going to use an AWS key. That's fine. This is the maintenance window, default to midnight UTC, also fine. Automatic software update and auto tune. Just leave this stuff as default. You don't really need to care about it. And you can go down to advanced settings. I don't think this does anything for us that we care about. Field cache allocation, percentage of heap space that's allocated to field data. Yeah, you don't need to worry about this stuff. And max clause, this can be useful in production to increase this number a little bit, but nothing that we care about right now. Okay, so now we can just take a look at our summary on the right here. So this is looking good. 1 AZ, 1 T3 small, 1 node, 10 gigabytes, public access, admin. This is all going to qualify for the free tier. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on create now. And unfortunately, this does take a little bit of time to set up, and you can monitor the progress right here. It's going to show you the step that it's on and just refresh this every couple minutes or so. But in my kind of experimentation, it took about 15 minutes to set this up just for a small node. So I'm going to fast forward this video to when this is done, and then I'll show you how to log into the dashboard. So I'll see you in a minute. All right, everyone. So the domain finally got deployed and we are ready to go. So in order to access the dashboard for our domain, which is pretty much equivalent to the old Kibana dashboard that some of you that may have used Elasticsearch in the past may know all about. In order to access that, we want to use this URL over here on the right. So it's got the /_dashboards appended to it. And this URL is just the normal domain endpoint. So if you want to interact programmatically with your cluster, then you would use this domain endpoint. But for us, we want to click on the dashboards URL. So I'm just going to click on that. It's going to launch a new tab here. And this is our brand new dashboard. And so we're going to start off by adding some sample data here. Alternatively, you can just explore on your own and come back to this a little bit later. But we're just going to use some of the sample data that they have provided just to kind of tinker with the dashboard itself and see some of the different visualization techniques that are available to us. So I'm going to go ahead here and click on add data. And this is just asking us for tenancy. We're going to leave this on global, not worth talking about this right now. Confirm. And then there's some different sample sets of data. So there's e-commerce orders, there's flight data, or sample web logs. So I'm just going to pick on the sample flight data here. I'm going to click on add data. And this is just going to insert a bunch of records into our Elasticsearch cluster so that we can start querying them. So this may take a moment or so. I'm just going to give this a second here and fast forward it if I need to. Okay, that took not long at all. We're going to go ahead and click on view data here. And this is the default dashboard that you get when you use these pre-created samples of data. And this is all based on document data that got inserted into our database. And if you wanted to, you're able to create all these different widgets in your own dashboard if you like, by going to over here on the left and then going to the dashboard section and then kind of creating your own. But you can see some of the different widgets that are available to us. So we can kind of explore our data a little bit. We can pick on origin city. I'm in Toronto, so let's do Toronto here. And then you can set destination city. Okay, these are the different ones. Let's say Mexico City, that's fine. Apply changes. Then all of our data should change to reflect the settings. So we can see there's only one flight, average ticket price, yada, yada, yada. So all this stuff updates. So if you clear the form, this should also kind of revert all the data to show you just the entire set of data that's at our disposal. And so you get all that sent back here. So there's a bunch of different types of widgets that we have here on this dashboard. So this top one up here is just for filters. There's a text widget over here. There's a pie chart. There's this kind of line graph with bubbles. There's kind of volume or count graphs. There's, I guess, like speedometer. I'm not sure what this thing is called. Histograms, more line graphs. There's stacked bar charts, normal histograms. I'm not sure what this thing is called, but there's a geographic element too. This is actually kind of cool where you can hover over each one and see all the connection points. So you can create all these different types of widgets directly in your own dashboard with just a drag and drop interface, and it's super, super simple to do it. So you can kind of come here and experiment with it. This is kind of more like what our raw data looks like, but this isn't the view of our raw data. Our raw data, well, I'll show you how to access that right now. Well, before that, I wanted to show you one quick thing, which is when you interact with Elasticsearch, you're using what's called the DSL or domain specific language. And it's kind of like, it's not really like SQL, it's its own specific thing. And I want to show you how you can use these widgets to get access to the DSL that if you wanted to, you can query against your Elasticsearch cluster and get the data that drives some of these queries. Because at the end of the day, each of these widgets are independent queries that are kind of pulling data and then just showing it in a particular way. So let's take a really simple one, which are this one over here, the total flights. Now, if you hover over this and then you go to these three dots over here, and then you go to inspect, and you go to the view up here on the top right and change this to requests. So you can see some just general statistics on the request that powered this query. And then if you go to request itself here, you can see this is the DSL that was provided to Elasticsearch to retrieve the data for this particular widget. And so some of this may be a little bit confusing if you've never seen this before, but if you take a look at query, we're basically saying for this query, we're applying a Boolean and we have a filter, and the filter is such that we're applying a range for a timestamp, where the time must be between this date, so September 16th and September 15th. And so that's effectively what we're doing in this query, which is the total flights, right? And so that's how this data kind of connects to the request. And if you look at the response, you're able to see exactly what got back here. So we got 329 different hits. We took 4, I guess this is milliseconds. You can even change this information as well. And I'm going to show you how to interact with the editor, where you can kind of copy queries in here and then paste them so that you can kind of just play with this on your own. And so now let's go to the visualization element to see what the actual data looks like in our cluster. So if we go to the 3 horizontal lines here at the top, and you can go to overview just to see some general things that you can go to here. You can search, you can go to the dashboard. That's how we get back to where we just were. If you click on discover here, this is the same way to do this, where if you click on these horizontal lines and then go to discover, this is going to let you kind of see the raw data. And so this is what kind of the default view, and this looks exactly like Kibana if you've ever used it before. And so a couple things to keep in mind here. So these are all flight records. So each horizontal row here is a separate flight record. You can look through some of the data. So destination country, well, I don't know what EC is, but this one is Great Britain. The origin weather was cloudy. It was going to Seoul. Actually, this doesn't really line up, right? Oh, okay, yeah. So origin city is Seoul. Destination is Great Britain. So coming from Seoul to somewhere in Great Britain. The ticket prices, the distance, all the details here for it. Now, if you're interested in changing the data that's in the histogram here, you can change the date. So you can look back. Okay, this is just looking back a day ago, but you can say like 7 days ago, for instance, and click on update. And there you go. So now it just repopulated based on those 7 days. And say, for instance, you only want to look at a couple fields, like you don't want to look at all of this information that's in each one. You can click on these different options on the left-hand side here. So for example, let's say destination city name. We just want to look at that. So you can see these are all the destination city names. And let's look for origin city names. So origin city name is right here. And so now we can see the origin and the destination. I think you can change the order of these. Actually, you got to remove and then re-add. So not ideal, but you can also get rid of these to get all your data back. So now it just reverts to the default. And to see the entire item for any particular row, you can just click on the kind of tab here, and then you can see it in a table format. These little symbols here indicate the types. So T for text, and then number for number. Boolean is this kind of binary thing. There should be like a date type as well. If we find a date, date. Yeah, here you go. So date, calendar for date. And you can also get this as a JSON object if you click on JSON. So you can get this and just copy and paste this with what's in the source key. So this is all like just the raw data that exists there. All right, so let's do a little bit of an experiment to work with this data to apply some filters. So we can filter this data down to identify certain records that kind of apply or adhere to certain constraints that we put in via filters. So say, for instance, we're trying to find all of the flight records that originate in Toronto, which is the airport code YYZ, which is where I'm from, and which have a delay. And if I were a betting man, I'd probably say that there's quite a few, so the percentage is probably pretty high, but that just shows you my experience with my airport. But so let's see how we can do this using a filter. So first of all, let's see what this data looks like. So the fields that we're interested in, I already have them kind of populated here for us. So the ones that we want are origin airport ID. So if we click on this, we can just add it to see what some of the records look like. I don't know if we can find one for YYZ. Oh, there's one. So YYZ. So this was one record of it. And we can also see flight delay. This will indicate whether or not there was or was not a delay. There's also an additional field down here where it shows you the flight time, actually flight delay minute. Yeah, flight delay minute. So you can do even more queries to say if it's delayed by more than 5 minutes or 60 minutes or whatever you want. But let's just go with kind of a binary yes or no kind of approach. And so if you click on this, you can also see what the data looks like. So there you go. So it shows you true or false. And so now let's say we want to identify all of the flight records that have the origin airport ID as YYZ and with flight delay set to true. So how do we do this? Well, we can go to filters up here and we can just start setting some of the fields that we want. So for the first field we want is the origin airport ID, and operator, we want this to be is. You can also do like is not, is one of, exist, does not exist. So typical operators that you can work with. The value that we want this to be YYZ, and it should just kind of filter or it's, I guess, capital well, there's YYZ. So it is case sensitive. Make sure there's no oops, let me type that again. I was trying to get rid of that space there, but apparently it doesn't like it. So let's click on save, and there should be a way to add another one. And there you go. So you have to add this filter up here. You can see that it already filtered some of this data already. So these are all the YYZ airports, or YYZ flights rather. And we can now say we also want to look at delay to see whether or not it was delayed. So and we can say true. And let's do that. So now we get all the trues. Let's take off the true now and look at it by time. So let's say we want to see flight delay time. So add filters. So flight delay minutes. So let's say is greater than, well, I guess you can say is between here. And then let's say it's between, I guess, 5 minutes and 60 minutes, something like that. So we can see what comes up here. Okay, so this is kind of one instance that matches. And if we take off the extra kind of filters, not filters, but the selected fields, we can see the full details of this. And so let's see. So we got this guy here. This one was going to Melbourne International Airport. That's the destination at least. The origin airport was YYZ. Where's the flight delay minutes? There it is. So it's 30, and it is indeed was delayed. So you can see how this does adhere to what we just specified. So this is how you work with the different filters. You can also just type up here. Let me get rid of these filters here. You can just type up here with whatever you want, and this should filter down the data for you automatically. And it's kind of smart about what it looks for. So it's doing it by origin airport ID up here. You can also do Toronto if you want and see all the things that match Toronto. So you'll see this probably in both origin and destination. Actually, you can see it right here. So origin Toronto, destination Toronto. Those are both highlighted. And so let's go now to the visualization part of the tool where we can see kind of more details and cut this data however we want. And then maybe I'll show you the dashboard as well. So let's go to visualize. And so it gives you some defaults here. So this is just a default histogram showing us origin airport ID. So these are the most popular ones. So looks like whatever UIO is and BOG. You can also add some sub buckets here if you'd like. Well, you can change the type as well. So I believe this is on Y-axis. So we're looking at count, the bucket. So it's automatically doing origin airport ID. Let's change this. Let's look at average ticket price, I suppose. Let's see what this looks like. This actually isn't a good visualization because it's just kind of giving us the uniques. Let's change this to something else here. Let's look at, I don't know, something a little bit more categorical in terms of the categories. Maybe destination country, let's see, and see what that gives us. So you can see, yeah, so Italy is the biggest, then the US, then China, then looks like Canada and Russia. Okay, so you can also do some additional kind of subcuts of this data now, besides just the quantity of flights that are in each category. So you can do something like add a different sub bucket. So let's try this. We're gonna go to add split series and sub aggregation. Let's go for, I guess, range. You can pick a field here. Let's try distance kilometers. And so what are the different cuts here? Okay, so between 0 and 1,000 and 1,000 to 2,000. And now for every one, it should give us a grouping now of the flights that were within both of these different categories within each bar. So let's try this and see what we get here. And there you go. So the ones that were for Italy here, you can see 91 were between 0 and 1,000, and 38 were between 1,000 and 2,000. So this kind of gives you an idea of what is possible here, just using the visualization element to explore some of your data. Okay, so now I want to just quickly show you how you can interact with your data set just using the raw DSL that comes with ElasticSearch as if you were doing this programmatically. And to access this screen here, you would just go to the top left and click on Overview, and then you go to Interact with the OpenSearch API. And so instead of having to use like curl or like doing a postman query, you can instead just do this directly in the in the OpenSearch dashboard. So it gives you some just kind of details here. If you want to put data, by the way, you have to use this notation put, but we're going to be using the search functionality to search through our data. And so earlier in the video, we copied one of those charts. We copied the source for it. So I still have it on my clipboard. So I'm just going to paste it in now. And this was the one where we were just looking at all the data that's between September 15th and 16th. And so in order to run this query, we can just click on this play button up here. And there you go. So this gives us all the data, just the raw count, since we asked for an aggregation here. And so you see there's 329 within this. And then if we just kind of increase this date range, I suppose if we change this to 10 to give us a bigger range, we should see a bigger number. So there you go, 1,917. And so this is a great way to experiment and play with the DSL to get familiar with it. And there is some documentation that you can refer to. So if you go to right here, this website, opensearch.org/docs/latest/query-DSL/index, you can see some more information here on just querying and using the DSL in general. So if you want to match specific terms, so here's how you search for a particular ID, for instance. There's Boolean queries, there's disabling expensive queries, there's doing full text queries, doing queries and filters, term level and full text queries combined or compared. So there's a bunch of information here that's available. It also shows you like some of the details of what these different fields mean that come from the response. So that is Elasticsearch. And now just to make sure you don't get charged anything, let's go back to the cluster and we're just going to clean this up to delete it. So we're going to go to the delete button over here, click on this, just type in the name of the domain and click on delete. Sometimes this takes about 15 minutes or so, but it will end up deleting and you should be good to go and avoid any extra charges. So that's it for this video. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.